All right, guys, we're on day 86 of developing massive nuts. Okay, all right, guys. So let's jump right into it, right? Well, they'll always be kind of funny, but this one, I guess, a little more serious because today I want to kind of talk about how like the ego is like that's the actual final boss, guys. Like, fuck, it's not lust, right? It's not these succubuses attacking you in your wet dreams. No, the actual final boss, spirituality, is like your ego because the more like I interact, have these thoughts, develop this awareness, it's like you realize the ego is like it's holding you back, and it's actually crazy. Like it's really crazy, right? Because here's how I think about it, right? I think at least the way for me, like meditation, like makes sense, and you being the observer of your thoughts is like the stillness of God, right? Be still and know I'm God, but also like the trance you get in like when you meditate and like there's no thoughts and you're just focused on the breath, that last singular point or stillness, that's definitely, you know, that's where God is, definitely. Because and for me, it's more so like, okay, when you get to that state, like really imagine, right? And this is something I've been thinking about more, like, has anyone ever heard those stories, like, where let's say there's a kid, right? They're stuck in the car and the mom, like, has to lock in and basically like lifts the car up and, saves it because that's, their child, it's like at that point, the goal is just save my daughter or son, and they thought about nothing else. So there was no delay. And that's another important thing too. I feel like when you're not operating by ego or, the false illusion, there's like no delay. So you're just going to intuitively do things and you'll be able to move and think. But I also feel like for us to interpret the actual world, like or actually find truth, you have to have mastery over your ego because if you don't, then it's still, like you still think bank balances matter. You're still viewing the external world, you haven't overcome the world, something I've talked about in other videos, but it's like you have to have mastery over your ego. And there's something I thought about too. It's like I have a friend. She's always like, time is an illusion, and it's interesting because I've always thought like time travel was like, and that's another thing too. It's like you really realize that anything's possible, but time in itself, you could argue that that could just be a construct like from our ego, because if you're connected with God or you're like you've reached that point, at that point in time, it's like I can't even begin to comprehend how timing and functions at that point. I guess you could go forwards, backwards, or whatever, but like quite literally is an illusion. But that statement too is also like a lot of people think like, oh, it's got to take a lot of time, but it's almost like there's two aspects to it too, right? Because let's take a business, right? Usually, or even like traditionally, like, oh, you got to invest, for 20, 30, 40 years, then you retire at 60, assuming you live that long, right? But that's a self-limiting belief too, I see now, where it's like, no, it doesn't have to take, that long. There's faster ways. But now on the other side of that, for me, it's like, okay, like if I really think about it, the actual process of attaining alignment or reaching that Christ consciousness or moksha or whatever you want to call it, depending on, your interpretation, that probably can't happen overnight. And I think that's okay too, because, let's think about it like this too, right? Anything really worth doing or really pursuing, it's gonna take time. And it's not that that's years, decades, but it will require, like it's not instant, I would argue now. And that's gonna take time because this whole spiritual journey, it takes you a while to learn yourself. You have to go through experiences, you have to develop the awareness and see all these things. But I really think now, like the ego, like it just there are so much things about me now. It's like, wow, like that seems really possible. It's like you feel like a kid again because I'm like, no, like genuinely, it's not even like, oh, maybe like no, like it's if you really lock in because for me, right? I've explained in other videos. The most important goal for me now, it's reaching enlightenment, Christ consciousness, or union with my divine nature. Because I feel like the pursuit of that goal, every other goal from the ego, you're gonna achieve, as a consequence. And not that's a bad thing. Nothing wrong taking care of your family, having a business, wanting to travel. But at least for me, I know that's the most important goal. Because if you reach that goal, you'll be able to do everything and more and things, you can't even imagine. You know, John 14:12, where it believes in will do greater things, the same things and greater. And I feel like that's a limited belief too, because you start to recognize all the stuff in the Bible, all these crazy things healing the sick. That's really not crazy. But now when I start to recognize like actual divine nature or what that means, it's like those things, they're like very normal. It's just getting to that point is what requires, the years of meditation and like looking inward and self study. Because another thing too, and it's like as your ego, you have I guess what we call like mini ego death. So you start to surrender it more and more and more. You recognize like, oh wow, there's like a lot of levels to this too, like there's the people that are like instant manifestation frequency, but then there's like, you have to actually like meditate, you got to take care of your body too. It's like there's so many, different aspects. It's honestly fascinating. But for me, it's like, oh, okay, like there's so much things we can actually like kind of push, so many different avenues now too. I'll start to learn more about yoga, more about Hinduism, even more about like Buddhism too, like how to meditate, like all these things. Like, and it's really fascinating because I feel like for me, it's like at the end of the day, remember, it's not about, religion. I don't want to call it religion anymore. I'd like the term like schools of thought, Buddhism, Hinduism, Taoism, Christianity. It's just different schools of thought. Because I don't really like the term religion because I feel like at least those four, it's like they're kind of pointing you towards, discovering your true nature. And that's where I'm like, the stillness is important because let's take a normal example, right? Like let's say, let's think, maybe it could even be something, like how you react to like anything. Like let's say, you and your brother, you had a fight and like that made you upset, but like your ability to react to that, but just to observe like that actual situation in its truest sense, without your ego, because I feel like without the ego, that's how you're actually able to interpret things like from stillness. And then that's how you can like really move because there's no like clutter, there's no delay. It's just like, okay, you focused on one point, you were able to examine it, from alignment, objectively through your consciousness, with no like delay or false illusion or whatever. And that's why I was like, yeah, no, ego is definitely like, it's the final boss. That's the whole thing with the Buddha, like, and then the cycle of suffering, because that's what the ego, because there's no suffering when you're divine state, you're pure, you've overcome the ego literally. So it's like, there's no suffering and all those things. It's like a serene peace, I would assume, as the Buddha describes. But it's like, me, it's like, I think with even lust too, and I'm like, it's made me kind of think, okay, so lust and love, they're similar, but they're not the same thing. But when you overcome your lust, it's not that. That's the thing too. Lust and like sexual attraction, or I'm starting to see now, they're also are not the same thing because the goal of human retention, guys, it's not for us to like just suppress the sexual energy, but it's also for you not to like, because what some people are talking about is more so like, oh, it's like, or what it's causing subconscious, like, oh, I have these thoughts, oh, I want to bang her, like, it's okay, like, it's okay, but it's just, you can't let that feeling define you, or you can't only see the person and want to do that to them. That's, the part you have to work on. That's where it's like lust as a trap, because some of us guys, we know we're very cooked. It's like, you look at a woman, that's the first thing you see. You can't even see past the external, because remember, guys, this isn't the final reality. We have to overcome this reality, but that requires you got to look inward too. Because I've noticed as I learn more about myself, you start to learn more about the people around you, right? And that's why I'm like, guys, like your circle, it's very, very important. I wouldn't have this awareness now. It's a consequence of the people I've been hanging around with. Literally, like one person I can think of, but many, honestly, definitely many people. But that's why if you have someone that's retaining, you better hold on to that person for life. Never let them go, because very few people are gonna like walk this path. And I mean, like the proper way, right? Because the goal isn't just to sit at home and be like, oh, I'm not gooning, so I'm winning. No, you gotta cultivate the energy, guys. Remember, move it into the gym, move it into developing this awareness too, just like have more moments where there's no noise, there's no music, there's no nothing, and you can sit in the awareness of your thoughts. So you can really like, even for me, I've noticed like before you react, there's like an internal pause where I'm able to actually like observe the thought and be like, okay, like why do I feel like that? If we objectively observe what's going on, there's no reason to feel like that. So I'm like, okay, that's the ego. And then I can like dissipate that feeling very quickly. And this is just the beginning phases. I assume it gets a lot easier or even more powerful the more you're able to sit in stillness. And that's why I'm like now like meditation is so important, But for me, it's like, and this is another thing too. It's like once you understand how important retention is, and because it's so like it can't even like that's why there's no woman equivalent. It's like I feel like the way they get to the divine, well, it is similar. Don't get me wrong. Of course, you're gonna meditate and do all these things, but for us, it's like because our ego and our are so intertwined, and it's like those are basically the two final bosses. Think like in Naruto, right? Basically, your ego is gonna be Kaguya, but the lust is gonna be Madara, right? Madara is that's a fucking tough ass nigga, right? It's fucking powerful as shit. So, but you got to beat him first, because it's very important. Because for me, it's like it's a lot easier now. It's like, I remember the thoughts. It's like I guess you do become more pure in a sense, right? It's not like because for me now, it's like if I see someone like I'm like she's pretty. I don't just default to she's got a nice ass or default she's pretty, but more so like if I actually see and interact with them, I'm like like they're nice, like they're cool. But I think this is important because it's like you're gonna see a lot of pretty people, but it's more so like as like to vet people or really feel them out. You don't truly know because it's like, okay, are they doing these things? Because to me, it's like really simple. If it's like at the end of the day, they have to improve you. I mean, at least in my interpretation, your partner. Because think about it, in my understanding, it's like your partner is basically gonna help you connect to the divine, right? That feminine energy, like in its purest sense. I think that's a Hinduism thing where like the male and female like fuse into one. But it's like if she's not helping you on this path, or if she's like thinks retention is, I would just run on side. I'm gonna be honest, but it's like because remember at the end of the day, like it's our mission first. That's the more important thing. So she can't, and this is where like she can't think she's more important than your mission. Because it's like a lot of you guys don't recognize how serious this shit is, right? This shit's not a fucking joke. This is spiritual fucking warfare, right? Think like One Piece, Marineford, or it's probably like the final war that's gonna happen in the final arc for anyone that's like actually reading the manga and stuff. But like this shit ain't a fucking game, so it's like you have to recognize how important that is. Because as soon as you recognize how important it is, I'm telling you, it's virtually impossible to relapse because there's a lot to lose, and it's not that you're gonna die if you relapse, but it's like and I talked about this in my last video too, but I gotta keep stressing it because it's like you look at any ancient yoga test, look at Hinduism, Buddhism, everyone talks about like not being lustful, but from that, they're really telling you to transmute or retain your energy. If you want to ask to project or being like the best or most, I think about like this. I want to be as dangerous as fucking possible, right? Of course, you want to attract like a good actual partner, but you also want to be able to move, through the world and not be swayed by anything. The way you become really dangerous is going to be through retention. Retention, I'd argue now fasting, and that's briefly touch on that, guys. I did a 3-day fast, like maybe like 2 weeks ago. Oh my god, game changing. I'm gonna prepare myself to do 7 days, but fasting makes you like imagine like anyone seen JJK, right? Fucking Gojo, like yeah, retention gives you the six eyes, but the limitless technique and the actual abilities and the physical strength, you're gonna get that from fasting. I would say so. It's like it's two halves, but you combine the both. Oh my god, you start moving real different because it's like everyone, especially now, right? You got people out here who are fat, and it's like if you can starve yourself from food, some could argue that's even harder than retention. I mean, honestly, let me think. No, I probably would say retention is harder. Well, I don't know. Honestly, I could really see both arguments, honestly, but I'm gonna say retention is harder. At least because I mean, because it's like a lifestyle. Like you have to eat, or at least one could argue that too. It's like you'll say something and you're like, oh, according to whom, on the basis of what? Like, why do we have to eat? Because there's this guy on Instagram. He hasn't eaten in approximately 6 months, and I'm like that. The ego too. Even things like that, you have to start checking yourself. Now, of course, there's logic, right? You can't just manifest like, oh, I'm gonna drink alcohol every day and nothing happens to my liver. But there's cases where it's like, oh, that's a self-limiting belief, but the ego, just has you think you're crazy. But once you recognize that, you can start to really like all your beliefs, how you react to everything. It becomes more and more like you become more and more aware, and there's a power because you can move from that because it makes you like really okay, being alone. Because remember, we're men, right? It's like we don't want to. It's not that we don't want to rely on anyone, but like we need to be this firm pillar times you'll need to lean on other people, but you want to be a strong, like firm pillar, Think of like when someone's meditating, like these Shaolin monks, nothing can shake them. Literally. That's the point, at least me that I want to get to. And that's why I dedicate myself to like this path now. That's why I meditate daily. I work out, I eat right. I'm gonna keep developing this awareness because guys, like there's gonna come a point, right, where I think I've had that. I guess that was the turning point. There's probably been a bunch of little points, but now it's like there's really no turning back. Like you're only gonna get more obsessed about spirituality and improving yourself because it's like even with two, it's made me like you want to present yourself the best way possible, but you got to be healthy so that you can develop the mind, and you want the mind sharp so you can manifest everything you want and more. Because before, part of me was like, it almost felt like I didn't deserve those things, but then you learn, we'll learn about the kingdom of God, how you're not separate from the divine. It's like you do have a right to those things, and it's not like ego, like like it's like there's no nobility in poverty. It's not like it's not an admirable thing, especially like you can only help so much people without like I mean you can help people without money, but you can definitely help a lot more people with money. So it's like why would we not want to use that like as a tool? And these are just some of the few thoughts I've been having, but this is why I'm like we have to keep on the path. Like encourage as many people as possible. Because for me, it's like, oh my God, you imagine like 1,000 men like in the same location and they all like on a year plus streak, or it's all like a lifestyle for them. Because I think that's the thing too. For me, it's like I only count days literally for the YouTube videos, but I would have long stopped because I only literally started counting because I had to figure out which day I was on because I was like, I'm gonna start retention, but then I was like, I was just going through the motion, You're so busy, you're working out, you're doing all these things. It's like the days really just fly by, but not in a bad way, but like because you're so busy. But for me, I only really track the days now, so it's like we know what day I'm on as we can kind of track the awareness. But it's really something I intend to do till I die because it's like gain so. Oh my God, guys! Like I'm talking about so much from doing this. Like it's the ultimate heavy restriction or the ultimate binding valve, whatever you want to call it. But in exchange for not releasing as often, you gain I was always say I was intellectual, but the thoughts I have now, I'm just like, damn, it's actually like it's time's illusion, literally, because I didn't think the awareness would develop this fast. It's like, and that's the universe too. It's like, oh, you're starting to move, so it's gonna start shifting things, resources, certain challenges, certain people too. Like we all do manifest those things, guys, and that's where it's like you are quite literally the creator of your reality. And that's why you got to retain because I'm sure you can do this without retention, but it's like retention is such a strong amplifier. It's like, why would I not want to advantage, why would I not want to access this power, especially when it's like, it's God given. Like it's our true nature. Like you're supposed to be in this state, where you're not overcome by lust. So that's why I'm like, for me, it's like, yeah, I'm doing this like to the end of time. Like, I'm trying to become like a Shaolin monk or like Goku anime, like literally, or Netero from Hunter x Hunter. That'd be a good example too, where he first started punching so fast, there was like a delay, like it broke the sound barrier. Go to scene, by the way. And that's why I'm like, repetition is so important, just like every day. Because a lot of us, we know what we need to do, but it's like, the reason we're not able to do it consistently is because we still think it's a joke or like there's no such urgency. But for me, it's like, even though time's an illusion, you want to get to that path as quickly as possible. So it's like me, it's like no more missed meditation sessions, it's like, and it really makes you move, a certain way because I'm trying to be as locked in, as possible. And I started recording these videos because the goal was to kind of help people like start on this or at least recognize like how important it is because there are certain self-limiting beliefs you're going to have that are going to they'll disappear like this. Like once you start to learn more about what God is. And that's where I'm like, you want to like read the Bible, of course, right? Something I plan to do more too, but it's like, like learn about yoga, learn about Buddhism. I learn about the Buddha, like all like the great spiritual leaders, because it's like, I feel like a lot of people don't understand that like all those leaders, the Buddha, they're basically telling you like how to connect back to the divine, like our true state. It's quite literally a guide on how to be like the most maxed out version of yourself that like for some reason none of the people, talk about. Because I feel like if you take the belief aspects of Christianity, you take the actual practice of meditation and become observer thoughts through like Hinduism, Buddhism, and then Taoism, where it's like you learn how to use that power and like move it and like stay centered. If you combine all those that person, I can't even begin to imagine the things that they would manifest, like how they would move. And that's why I'm like, for a lot of you guys, it's like the most important thing is just like keep retaining, because it's like all the answers you want and everything are gonna come as a consequence to retention. So honestly, just keep retaining, or keep increasing your frequency, your vibration, your kundalini, your prana, whatever. Just get that as high as possible, because people, will notice. I'm only on day 9, and people are like, "Oh, you're pretty different." It's like I can't imagine like when I'm on 200 plus in a fasted state, like how I'm gonna move and just be able to attack. At that point, fear is just gonna, because I'm gonna get more and more confident. But like this is the proper way. Like this is our proper state. But yeah, guys, that's day 86. Almost at the big old day 90. Even though nothing magical is gonna happen, or maybe something is magical gonna happen. I'll start levitating, or some shit, or I'll start throwing Rasengans. But a part of me is like, yeah, like that's not, it's not impossible. So yeah, that's day 86, guys. Stay locked, stay retaining, don't goon.